So first, let me take you back to the late fall of 2004. My friend Linda was visiting with us one weekend, and while she was here, we happened to be sitting around in the sun space right in this room, and she looked at some of my stones and crystals and asked me if I had ever thought about photographing them. And truthfully, I said no, I had not. So I gave it some thought, and it sounded like an interesting idea. So in early January of 2005, I decided to try it out and use some of my lenses with my camera, and wound up getting some really nasty results. They just were not good at all. So I knew I had some work to do. So basically I figured out what I needed as far as a good macro lens, the proper lighting, and also how to set it all up, and just experimented for the next couple of months on weekends and in my spare time. And I found after a while that I was able to get it pretty well done. So I started to send out images to some of my friends just to get their reactions, and wound up getting some interesting responses. Interesting pieces that they were seeing, elements within, some stories that they were seeing, and that gave me some encouragement to keep doing it, and I kept at it and wound up putting a whole collection together, to the point where in the summer of 2007, I wound up going to a gallery in New Haven with my portfolio, and wound up in a two-man show with Larry Russ, which went really well. Then I went over to EO Art Lab in the spring of 2008, met with John Schroeder and Sherry Coleman, and managed to get into a three-person show with Ellen Carey and Jody Dole, and that also went very well. From that point on, I entered in a number of juried shows throughout Connecticut, and had a number of my pieces shown, as well as in every group show at EO Art Lab. And in late last fall of 2010, I learned that I was going to have a solo show at EO Art Lab. So in February and March of 2011, we've had an interesting solo show at EO Art Lab. Stones and crystals are interesting to me for many reasons and at many levels. For example, when you consider the geology of stones and crystals, it's amazing how much diversity there is in what's out there in terms of their composition, where they come from. There's just so much out there. And you consider how old they are. They're millions and many millions of years old. A 50 million year or 100 million year old piece of stone is no big deal in the world of geology. Some stones and crystals are also very beautiful to look at, and they can be quite striking, as you can see by some of these pieces that I have here. And then there are also the fact that some crystals, for example, have what's called a piezoelectric effect, whereby a mechanical force applied to the crystal will result in an electric current, which in turn produces electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic forces. And that's really the principle behind a lot of the old radios. You heard of crystal radios, what's in sound equipment, scientific equipment. All of those kinds of pieces deal with that. Then we can also think about the metaphysical aspects. There's a lot that's been written about the metaphysics of stones and crystals in terms of energy, and so there's a lot of books out there on that. And then think about the fact that cultures and civilizations throughout history have used stones and crystals in their rituals, in their ceremony, in their dress, in their jewelry. And up to the present time, we know that people are wearing jewelry and enjoying gemstones. So there's just a whole many levels that one can think about when we consider stones and crystals. So the process begins with me acting as a hunter-gatherer. I go to stone shops as well as gem and mineral shows and find my source material. And I look for unique pieces that have interesting patterns with potential. Well, if the pieces don't work out, they can always make great gifts. Anyway, I wind up picking a good weekend to do a shoot, select some excellent ambient electronica type music, and get myself into the mode, freeing my mind from outside distractions. I set the subject piece in my studio with my camera and 100mm macro lens on a tripod and my daylight balanced lights, and basically go on a journey. Just as a photographer goes on a hike at a mountain scene, scoping out the landscape, in a similar way, I am taking a hike through that rock. As I look through the lens, I search for compositions formed by patterns, colors, textures, and tonal gradations. At the same time, I open my senses and allow my mind to consider history, mythology, geography, biology, physics, religion, and many other subject types. It's all fair game in terms of providing me material for a point of departure, and my mind is stimulated to visualize a myriad of possibilities. I'll be open to hidden memories and inner dreams. Oftentimes, a stone will trigger the memory of a dream that I may have had as a child. Anyway, the creative process results in imaginary realms evoking ancient and future fantasies, as well as planetary and cosmic scapes traversing space, time, and dimension. A recent direction for me has been to start playing with metal printing. And so this is an example of one of the early pieces that I did just a few months ago. It's called Icarus. And it basically uses an infused dye metal printing process. And the way it works is the image file is printed on a piece of photographic paper by the lab. It's printed in reverse, which is in turn sandwiched onto a piece of aluminum that has been covered with a coat of resin. It is then placed into a hot press and heated up very rapidly. And when that is done, the dye sublimation process allows the dye to be vaporized and to be infused into the resin-coated aluminum. It's a very interesting process. So this is a 30 by 40 inch piece, and it's called Icarus. When I photographed this piece of black opal, which is actually something that comes from Australia, I saw the Greek mythology here, Greek islands with rocky shore, along with waves of sea and maybe hills and mountains in the background with sky. And then I saw this tumbling form here on the side, which was a little curious, but turns out that to me is Icarus, who is falling. If you remember the story of Icarus, his father Daedalus told him that he should fly, but not fly too close to the sun, because the wax that is holding the wings in place would melt and he would fall. Well, of course, Icarus did not listen to his father. He flew way up too high, close to the sun, and wound up melting the wax, and therefore fell down through the sky. So here's a case of pride and arrogance and the ecstasy of flight, which basically overtook Icarus and led to his demise. So it is an interesting duality here of the beauty of the scenic landscape, and at the same time there is the fatality of him falling to his death. So it really indicates the reality of balance that one needs. If one has ecstasy, at the same time there's a need to balance it out with relative constraints so that there's a proper balance in one's life. In this case, in life in terms of not dying by falling down into the sea. Bismuth is a bicubic crystal that is formed in a lab. And what's interesting about it is that since it's three-dimensional, there are these oxide layers on the outer coat of it that have multiple wavelengths, and these wavelengths give off light through reflection with various colors. As you can see in this piece called Maya Stellartronica, you can see these wonderful blues and purples and orange and gold and so on, and they almost radiate out from the actual source. I call it Maya Stellartronica because I see multiple things happening here, whereby the Mayan art and architecture is depicted, hence the name Maya. Stellar, because I don't see this as something from this particular planet. It could be from some other some other place that's out there, so hence the word stellar. And then I like Tronica because it also evokes the idea of electronics, computers, circuit boards, machines, robots. All of those kinds of images come to mind. So therefore, I see this as a Maya Stellartronica kind of a mix. As you can see, this is also one of the quad images where I have a root image that is repeated and turned into an array. On another level, I also can see this as maybe a female robot in a whimsical way, whereby Maya would be the first name, and then Stellartronica is her last name, and Stellar would be her maiden name. So you can have a little fun with that. So again, multiple layers of meaning can be expressed through some of these images.